Welcome everyone to another episode of Retro Wrestling Reviews. Fredo Esparza here, and this week we look back at World Class Championship Wrestling's April 24th, 1982 show. Before we get to the review, be sure to click that subscribe button. We'll have more wrestling show reviews as well as the Lucha World podcast and other content available on this channel. This episode of World Class was taped at the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas. This week's show is hosted by Mark Lawrence. I think this is one of his early appearances hosting the show, because prior to that, he was mostly just doing ring announcing. Here he is doing the hosting of the show. And it opens up with Mark Lawrence interviewing Armand Hussein before his match. Hussein claims to be the African world champion and says that World Class is the only wrestling promotion that can get their TV in the Sudan and other parts of Africa by satellite. He then speaks in another language, possibly gibberish, not sure, and heads over to the ring. Armand Hussein beats Sal Olivares in the first match after a knee drop for the pin. Prior to the match, Hussein tells the ring announcer who is in for Lawrence that he should always be introduced first. He then requests that Olivares leave the ring so that he can do his traditional camel walk before the match starts. The crowd boos. Lawrence claims that this has a religious significance to Hussein. Sal Olivares tries to use his speed on Hussein. Hussein spends a lot of time complaining to referee David Manning. Olivares uses a head scissors on Hussein, and that keeps Armand in check for a bit. Hussein ends up cheating throughout the match and eventually catches Olivares with a clothesline and follows that up with a knee drop for the pin. The second match on the show had Bugsy McGraw beating Raul Castro after he climbed off the top rope and hit a big splash for the pin. Castro, much like Olivares in the previous match, tries to use his speed against McGraw. Castro gets in a bit more offense. He catches McGraw with a series of topes in the ring, but Bugsy blocks one attempt and then starts to stomp on Castro. Bugsy uses his elbow to beat on Castro and eventually weakens him to get the big splash off the ropes, and Bugsy spins around in victory. Kerry Von Erich and Al Madrill join Mark Lawrence for an interview and talk about being the world-class tag team champions. Madrill mentions that they are willing to defend the titles against anyone. Each praises the other as a partner. Kerry mentions he loves rock and roll music and that gets him fired up before his matches. That's one of the funny things about the world-class interviews with the Von Erichs. They always added an extra tidbit about their personal lives, and half the time I think they were joking with whoever was interviewing them, because it just seemed like they were just, a little bit off at that when they were talking about anything that wasn't wrestling related. The third match on the show had Wild Bill Irwin beating Richard Blood after a running knee drop for the pin. This was a good match. Fans were chanting Chauncey at Irwin, who was wearing his Texas heavyweight title. Blood got in a lot of early offense against Irwin. Some cool reversals early in the match. Blood had the fans behind him. Irwin was able to catch Richard Blood with a kick to the face. He gained control of the match and beat on Blood for a bit. Irwin then caught Blood with a double thrust chop. Blood recovered and they each exchanged blows. Referee Bronco Lubick warned Irwin. Irwin then hit Blood with a knee to the head, but Blood kept fighting back, and as he fired up late in the match, he was able to get some punches and a dropkick at Irwin. He even caught Irwin with a forearm smash. Blood then charged at Irwin but got tossed into the ropes. That then led to Irwin slamming Blood, and then he ran and hit his running knee drop for the pin. This was actually a really good match, as I said earlier. Definitely for a TV match, especially from that era, far better than you normally would get. Post-match interview with Wild Bill Irwin, and he mentions that he learned that finisher from a friend who has been in wrestling for a very long time and states that no one will ever beat him for the Texas heavyweight title. The fourth match on the show had Kerry Von Erich beating Black Gordman with a sunset flip off the ropes for the pin. This was another good match. Also a fun match with Gordman being very vocal and loud, as you can hear him at times screaming when Kerry would go after him or take him down with a hold. Good back and forth early in the match with the two exchanging punches. The fans started to chant, "We want the claw" at Kerry. Gordman responded by yelling "no" at the fans, which was a funny reaction. And it, like I said, Gordman was very good at interacting with the fans. Kerry got Gordman in the claw and even picked him up in the air, but Gordman reached the ropes and screamed for mercy. Gordman is later able to get quite a bit of offense on Kerry, including getting him with a nerve hold. Kerry escaped that hold by grabbing hold of Gordman's left leg and taking him down to the mat. Gordman then recovered and got Kerry in the abdominal stretch, but Kerry escaped by hip tossing him off him. Gordman then jumped back up on his feet and attacked Kerry, but Kerry was ready and punched and delivered some punches at Gordman. Gordman was able to whip Kerry into the corner, but Kerry, as he was being sent into the corner, Kerry climbed up to the top rope, up the ropes, and caught Gordman with a sunset flip for the pin. Like I said, this was a really good match. I thought this was probably a lot better than the previous match, but again, TV matches, and you kind of you're not expecting 5-star matches. These are just good matches that you're getting on TV, that are just building up whatever storylines that they have going behind them, as far as, building up the wrestlers as contenders. Kerry for Flair, and obviously Irwin as the Texas Heavyweight Champion. Again, Gordman was really good. This is Gordman a little bit later in his career, and he still was very good at working the crowd and also being able to, he still could move. So that was also another thing. I think a lot of people would see him now and, they'd be, he was okay, but given that era, he was actually far better than, as far as somebody that you could bring in to work with the Von Erichs. He was really good. Wild Bill Irwin then returns again for an interview. He claimed that he didn't steal the Texas Heavyweight title from Madrill. He also mentions he got rid of his manager, Captain Frank Dusek, and he now can beat anyone without him. That is then followed by Armand Hussein and King Kong Bundy joining Mark Lawrence. Hussein tells Lawrence he should dress better for TV that airs around the world. King Kong Bundy mentions he joined H&H Corporation because all he cares about is money and making more of it than he ever did with the Von Erichs. The main event on this week's episode was the Spoiler beating King Kong Bundy, who was accompanied by Armand Hussein. Again, this was a fun match. Bundy attacked the Spoiler before the bell rang. Spoiler made a comeback and landed a lot of chops off the middle rope at Bundy. They then exchanged some hard shots at each other throughout the match. Spoiler caught Bundy with the iron claw across the forehead, but Bundy countered by putting him in a bear hug. Bundy then just shoved the Spoiler into the corner to break the claw. He tried to remove the Spoiler's mask. Spoiler held on to him by grabbing it with his teeth. That was actually a cool spot where Bundy was pulling the mask and you could see Spoiler just keeping the mask on his face by holding it with his teeth. That was a cool visual. Another bear hug attempt by Bundy, but Spoiler escaped. Bundy then tossed the Spoiler to the floor. The Spoiler then pulled Bundy to the floor with him and slammed him into the ring post. Bundy again went after the mask. The referee called for the bell to DQ Bundy for tearing the Spoiler's mask. The two continued to brawl and the referees tried to break it apart. Post-match, the Spoiler told Mark Lawrence that he wanted Bundy in another match and that it takes a better man to remove his mask. Overall, this was a fun episode of World Class. The last 3 matches were good. First 2 were kept pretty short, with McGraw and Hussein getting smaller wrestlers who could actually do a little more in the ring. So that kind of made the match those 2 matches a little more entertaining than they really were. And also, the crowd was very much into into this show. Best match on the show was the Kerry Von Erich versus Black Gordman match. Again, the Bundy Spoiler match had a really good brawl. Was a really good brawl. Again, World Class had a great crowd for the most part during the early 80s, and they really made the shows more livelier. You felt a little more excitement watching these matches. So like something that was, just an okay match would come across as a good match just because there was a little more energy in the building for those matches. But I would say this was definitely a good episode, and I would recommend it. That's it for this review. Be sure to subscribe to the Retro Wrestling YouTube channel, and we will be back again soon with more reviews.